Hello, my lovelies. I've got a new microphone. Can you tell? Today we are going to be making a bullet journal cover, or planner cover, or book cover, whatever kind of cover you want to cover. So this is the one I previously made. You might have seen it in my previous videos, but today we are going to make this one. So I'm going to show you step by step how we do that. But before I do that, I've asked Lee to help me out with my Skillshare promotion, so please enjoy.
This video was brought to you in part by Skillshare. Skillshare is dedicated to helping you learn a new lifelong skill. Isn't that wonderful? It's an online learning community with more than 25,000 classes. You can find many genres such as art, bullet journaling, brush lettering, and even business and technology-oriented classes. One of the great things that I love about Skillshare is that they support small creators, either on their website or on the YouTube, helping people like Elise to build her dream business and earn us money so that we can enjoy lots of tea and crumpets. Another absolutely spiffing thing about Skillshare is that if you have a busy schedule filled with cricket or perhaps enjoying the Times crossword, you can learn anywhere you like. No, you don't even have to leave the house to take a class. With Skillshare, you can learn at a time and pace that suits your individual lifestyle. Now, would you like to know the best bit? You can sign up for free for 2 months to see all the wonderful and delightful things they offer. If for some reason you find that Skillshare doesn't suit your needs, there is no obligation to continue on your learning journey. Good job, Skillshare! We salute you! Please see the description section of this video for more details. And thank you, Skillshare, for supporting my little lady.
So, to make your planner cover, you are going to need the outer fabric, some lining. You'll want a tape measure. I've got a big pair of scissors for cutting my fabric and a smaller one for the threads. I've got a big quilting rule, which just makes things easier to cut sometimes. One of those erasable fabric markers, and some pins and some elastic. I recommend you use something at least 1/2 inch wide, really, for extra sturdiness. And then of course you're going to want your journal. So we're going to start by taking the measurement of our journal from the back cover to the front cover. Mine is 12.5 inches. And I'm going to write that down because my memory isn't fantastic. And then we're going to go from the top to the bottom of the book, and for me that is 8.5 inches. Now if you want to use batting, which you definitely don't have to, the book will be absolutely fine without it, but the batting gives it a bit of extra fluff and smudge and snuggles. But I wouldn't recommend using anything too thick. You want a very thin batting. So you'll want to adjust your seam allowance as well. If you've got batting, you'll want between maybe 1.25 to 1.5 inches of seam allowance, and no batting, I would give it 1 inch. So to work out my measurements, I'm doing my 12.5 from cover to cover plus my 1.5 inch seam allowance. That makes 14 inches. And then for the height of it, it's going to be 8.5 plus that 1.5 seam allowance, which is by 10 inches. If you're not using batting, don't forget you only want 1 inch. So now I'm going to cut out my piece of my fabric, and it might be a good idea to bear in mind, especially if you've got like patterned fabric, whereabouts you're going to place. Oh, listen. Oh. That's just such a good sound. So when you're cutting your fabric, make sure that you are placing it in a sort of position for optimal beauty. By which I mean, make sure you're including the parts of the pattern that you like and making sure things are as straight as possible. Now, I said this was lining, but actually it is for the oh, look at that. Oh, I couldn't get it off. Yes, this is actually going to be the pockets, the sleeves, pocket sleeves. It's where your book's going to slip into. And I'm going to iron it because it's much easier to cut fabric and get the right measurements if it's ironed. If it's not too bad, then I don't really bother, but this had some real strong creases in it. So I'm using my previous piece to cut this fabric. Sometimes you don't have to pin it because the fabrics sort of stick to themselves, but these ones, they sort of shifted about a bit. There's my head. So I'm going to use that as a template to cut the pockets out, and it's just going to be exactly the same size. Oh, get ready, ready. It's so good. It's so good. So like AMS, ASMR, AMRMS. You know what I mean? The thing that makes you feel like, ooh. Oh God. Right, so I've done the same thing to two other pieces of fabric, the batting and the lining. So I've got my outer fabric, my batting, my lining, and my pocket piece fabric. So with the pocket piece fabric thingy-mabobby thing, I'm going to cut it exactly in half. Well, not exactly, I mean as close to exactly as you can get, but don't be like crazy mad about it. You can use the iron to press it in. Sometimes you can sort of use your fingers to press it in, but I want a nice easy crease to see. It makes it easier to cut. So it's always good to have an iron handy when you're working with fabric. It's just a good idea. And then I'm going to fold it in half again and iron that flat. And then I'm just going to do exactly the same to the other one, and that will give you your sleeve side pocket thingy-mabobby things. Now I'm going to kind of start constructing it, but not really, because I'm going to keep going forwards and backwards to the machine. But you're going to have your batting on the bottom, and then you are going to place your lining fabric. So this would be the lining piece. I know it looks like my outer cover, but no, this would be the lining piece. Now I was going to start constructing this a little bit, but I took a detour because I forgot about the ribbon. You might want to add a couple of pieces of ribbon to your planner cover, journal cover, book cover, whatever it is cover, so that you can add some bookmarks. Now I'm adding 2 pieces of ribbon to make my bookmarks because I want to be able to section off my monthly and my daily logs. So here I am using a lighter to singe the ends. I'm not burning them, I'm not setting them on fire, I'm just heating them up because that makes the fibres sort of stick together and it will stop it from unravelling or, what's the word? Fraying. It'll stop it from fraying at a later date. And then I'm going to get my elastic so that I can make an elastic closure for my book. That's what I'm trying to say. Fibrofog, sorry. For my elastic, I'm just wrapping it round my pen and giving myself about ½ an inch, maybe a bit less either side of it, because I don't want it to be too loose, because the elastic can always stretch for a bigger pen, but if you put a thin one in, it's just going to slide right on out. So once we've got our little pieces, I've got my pocket sleeve thing, and we're going to sew along the top edges. Now these are the closed edges, not the open ones. You want to sew along the closed edges, and that just gives it sort of a crisp, neat kind of finish, and it stops the fabric from shifting underneath itself. I'm stitching this right on the very edge of the fabric, and you want to do a forwards and backwards stitch when you start and you stop. always. And always trim your threads. My nan would say, always trim your threads. So once you've got those pieces stitched down, you're going to get your elastic for the closure and place it down the centre of one of the pockets, and then the elastic for your pen loop. You're not going to place it outwards, you're going to place it inwards, because once you turn it through, it's going to be on the right side of the cover. If you were to put it on the outside, it would get lost inside the lining. So we're going to stitch those in along these bits here. Now I tend to start in the middle of the elastic because then you don't have to get over the first bump. It's just, I find it easier to do it that way. It stops it from slipping in any other direction. And I'm roughly measuring sort of the centre of the pocket. If you're sort of new to sewing, then I wouldn't suggest using any sort of stretchy or silky kinds of fabric, because it makes this sort of stitching part quite difficult, especially when you've got all the layers and they're all shifting about underneath itself. So I would definitely recommend something a little bit hardier and stiffer. So next I'm just finding the centre of my lining fabric, because that's where I'm going to place my ribbon, and they're just going to sit one on top of the other right in the centre. The reason I've kept the lining and the outer cover fabrics the same and use the other fabric for the pockets is because you're not really going to see the lining, because your book's going to cover that. So you want your pockets to be a fancier fabric, because that's the bit that you're actually going to see. Also, when you put it all together, you want to make sure that your fabric is all facing the right direction, so the patterns are facing the right way up. So once you've stitched that in, we can start actually constructing the cover properly. So you've got your batting, your lining, then you're going to put your pocket side pieces on, and then I was going to put this on top, but don't do that yet. Don't do it. Before you pin this down, you want to lift it back up and pin that ribbon up out of the way, because when you're stitching around the edge, you don't want to get it caught in there. Once you've pinned that ribbon up out of the way, you want to get your outer piece of fabric and place it on top, and you want to make sure that it's facing right side downwards. So I'm going to mark in here where I'm not going to stitch. In between these little marks, I'm going to leave it open, because that's where I'm going to turn the cover through when I'm finished. So we're going to stitch round this edge. So whether or not you're using batting, you are going to sew 1/2 inch in from the outside edge of the fabric. We did the adjustments before for the batting. And it's not even something you have to do, but it just gives extra space for the batting to sit. If not, it can end up being too tight, and then you have to really try and force your sort of the covers of your book. You've got to really squeeze them right into the sleeves, and it can sort of warp the book covers. So I like to give myself a little bit of wiggle room. I suppose you could do this without a sewing machine, because you could do it by hand, but you'd have to make sure that your stitches are close together so it's not going to come undone. And maybe you could even use fabric glue, but I've never tried that myself. So I'm going to trim off my my seam allowance now, and I'm leaving the seam allowance at the bottom because it's going to make it easier to turn back under when we top stitch it. So when you go in here, don't forget, right, you want to be able to see your front cover and your lining. That's where you're going to pull it through, and then that will make sure it's all right when you come through. But be careful when you pull it through, because you've got a pin in there. The amount of time I've stabbed myself with a pin, it's not much fun. So just be very wary of that pin in there. And ta-da, we're done. Now you want to push your corners out as best you can. It might be a good idea to use a pair of scissors, just don't poke straight through. When you're trimming off your seam allowance, if you trim the corners, it can make it easier to push them through once you've turned it through. I hope that makes sense. Now this bottom piece I'm folding up, and that's where we're going to top stitch it shut. That piece of thread's really bugging me. Ah, gone. Thank you, past me. So we're going to place them together and then stitch all the way, all the way around the edge. And you can come as close as 1/4 of an inch in because you've given yourself such a big seam allowance because of the batting. But I I still get it pretty close to the edge because I don't want it to be too snug. I want the cover to slip inside easily. We're nearly done. Yee! So I'm trying not to go over the elastics. I'm sort of moving them out the way so I don't stitch on top of them. And it's pretty easy, you just lift your presser foot and stuff, but you don't really want to stitch on top of them because that's gonna... Just trust me, just don't do it. And you... God, that didn't work out as planned. And you are done! Yay! That's how it was supposed to come out. If you enjoyed this tutorial, give me a thumbs up. Let me know in the comments if there's anything else you would like to see. I was thinking about making some more with more pockets and even an sort of attached pencil case, that sort of thing, but more spaces to hold washi tape and notes and all that sort of stuff. If you want to see that, let me know because I can definitely make some more and design some different journals. I'm all excited because I'm done. I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. Like and subscribe if you did, and I will see you in the next video.